Now, I know I don't sound like Caleb, and I lost a couple pounds, and I grew a little bit, but I do look like Caleb, don't I? Alright, I'm cooler? Thank you. They are his. I stole them off his desk. I did beat him at the polo contest. Alright, so, since Caleb's gone at the Philippines, he had me make the lesson. So, that's what I'm going to do. So what we've been doing is kind of going over a little chunk of Hebrews, and my chunk is Hebrews 11 through 12. If you could turn in your Bibles to it, or look up at the screen, whichever one you want. It says, "By faith, even Sarah herself received ability to conceive, even beyond the proper time of life, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, there was born even one man, and him as good as dead at that, as many descendants as the stars of heaven in number, and innumerable as the sands which is by the seashore." It's quite a bit, guys. It's quite a bit. Alright, so that's kind of what the verses that we're going to be kind of elaborating on, that we're going to be working from, and that's just kind of the main part. So, what Caleb's been trying to reiterate throughout the weeks is something that's kind of been our theme. It says, worship comes first. Faith that worships will also walk. Faith that walks will also work. Faith that worships, walks, and works is willing. And faith that is willing will sometimes have to wait. That's my little tidbit that I added on for this week. Is faith that is willing has sometimes got to wait. So, an example for waiting. Christmas morning, you're waiting, you got a big family together, and you're not one of the youngest kids. So you gotta wait for the little kids to open up their little presents, don't you? Does anybody have to do that? Anybody? Yeah? Some of you guys, younger kids, you guys are like, yeah. Being the oldest, yeah, you gotta wait for the younger kids to open up their presents first. And you get antsy because it's Christmas and you want to know what you got, right? Who present peeks? Alright, so just keep that in mind, that you don't like to wait to open your Christmas presents, right? Alright, so, another one. Has anybody been to the airport? Raise your hand. Anybody been to the airport? I have not. David, how many times have you been to the airport?
Too many to count.
Too many to count. Do you have to do a lot of waiting at the airport?
Either waiting to park, or waiting to get your ticket, or waiting to get your luggage checked, or waiting at security, or waiting at the gate.
There's a lot of waiting.
Sometimes I just wait to wait.
Just wait to wait?
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to wait on the bus. I'm here to wait. Layovers take like hours. Or days, yeah. Days. No, I don't know where you got that. Just kidding. Okay, so, yeah. So if any of you have been to an airport, you know what waiting is, obviously. But I don't, because I've never been on a plane. So, there are many things that we have to wait on in life. But waiting isn't always bad. God makes us wait, but changes our lives and makes us stronger in the process. So, I think the reason we don't like to wait is that waiting feels like work. So is waiting good or bad?
Good.
Oh. It's good and bad?
It's good.
It's good?
It's bad.
It's bad? It's good? It's bad? It's both? It's boring? That wasn't an answer. Depends on what you're waiting for. That's a good answer. Alright, so let's go ahead and go to Isaiah 55, verse 8. You guys can just look up the board because we're going to go through quite a few passages. Alright, so it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." So, Lord declaring it, guys. That means the Lord said it. So God's thoughts and intentions are way different than ours as humans. He's got a whole different mindset up there. We're just thinking, oh, what am I going to wear tomorrow? What am I going to eat for breakfast? He's thinking, man, after this guy dies and his kids die and his kids die, there's going to be an awesome kid in there somewhere. And it's going to be awesome. And it's going to make the world a better place. So he's looking right through us to get to the bigger goal, as in an awesome place. Awesome place that knows God. Just like we know, once we reach every part of this nation, that's when God's going to come down. So he's looking at us to reach across the nation, but that probably won't happen in our lifetime. Because we're not doing a very good job of it. There's still tons of people out there that still haven't heard the message of God. So that's just something that God's working through us. And we're waiting for that, aren't we? So God is a God of purpose. And he always knows what he's doing. And we're all about the goal, but God's all about the process. We just care about the final outcome, while God cares on how we get there. It'd be like a track runner, just caring if they win the race or not. But God cares about how that runner practices, how they take care of themselves before a race, how they prepare, how they get ready, how they wake up that morning. He cares about the lead up to the race and not necessarily the race in itself as much. But as a track runner, it'd be like, oh, I'm going to go sit on the couch and then Friday, I've got a race and I'm going to go win.
It sounds like my brother.
Come on, guys. Alright, so, just think about that. So now, we've gone to the story of Abraham. In Genesis 15, 1 through 6, it says, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abraham said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. So, he's pretty much like, God, I'm old. I'm too old to have kids. Everybody my age has already had their kids, and I still haven't had a kid. So, my servant over here is going to have to be my heir to my estate. He's going to get everything I got because I can't give it up to anybody because I got nobody. And the Lord's like, hey, dummy, I can do whatever I want. I can make you have kids whenever I feel like. It doesn't matter how old you are. He takes him outside and says, try to count the stars. Has anybody ever tried that?
Yes.
Have you ever counted them all?
Never.
And how many did you count?
Too many.
I'm pretty sure there's more than anybody could count in a lifetime. And two. No. But, so yeah, there's a ton of stars. And he's like, Abraham, you're going to have as many kids as that. Your descendants are going to be more than the stars. He even goes as far as saying as many as grains of sand there is on a beach. That's a lot. Because just in like a handful, there's like billions of specks of sand. Just crazy. So just imagine that, having that many descendants. It's a big family reunion. So, and not just Abraham needed to pave the way. Sarah did too. They both ended up having to wait 25 years for God to fulfill his promise. That's kind of crazy, guys. 25 years. How many of you guys are 25 or older? I should see maybe like 2 hands. Yeah. And not a teenager, because you guys are teenagers, not 25 years old.
Lord, is that an adult or
Alright.
age or two?
Hey. Alright, so they even made some big mistakes while waiting. Abraham even thought that God wasn't going to go through with his promise. So he tried having a kid with his servant. Genesis 16:1-6 says, Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abraham, The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abraham agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian slave, Hagar, and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarah said to Abram, You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Your slave is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. Now, that it turns out to be a bigger mess than needed. It kind of gets to where the point that Hagar runs off to a spring. The Lord comes to her and tells her that the Lord's been watching Hagar, and he's going to help out, and he's going to make things right. But that's a lot of trouble that they didn't necessarily have to go through, because Abraham should have just kept trustworthy to God and was like, God, I don't think you can do it, so I'm going to go try to find my own way. Well, guys, most of the time, our own ways are kind of dumb. Just face it, our ways are dumb. God knows what he's doing. So, with that, what's the correct way of waiting? Patiently? Anybody else? Correct way to waiting. Calmly?
Wait through it.
Huh. Well, I don't think they had iPhones back then, guys.
Just wait through it.
Okay, so, hey guys, back in. Alright, so the correct way to wait is without being passive. Our faith has to be an active faith. We can't just sit there and be like, oh, God's going to do it. I don't have to do anything because God's going to do it. Any day now. Oh my God. Well, you're doing nothing. Get up and do something. You don't just have to sit there. You got to be able to get up, do stuff on your own, but also let God run his course. Second, we need to wait without causing problems. Works of the flesh always cause problems. That's why we should wait for God's works, because God's works don't cause problems. Because he knows what he's doing, and he knows everything that's going on billions of years from now. So, I think he knows. Third, we need to wait without missing God's promise. We can only see what's right in front of us. Think big, guys. Think outside of the box. Because failing to realize that it's all about God's purpose and not our own breeds false expectations. And we don't want that. We don't want false expectations. We want to know that it's all about God's purpose. Like the Bible says, we're temples of him. Our bodies are temples. And we are to bring it in and represent. So, represent, guys. Think outside the box. Don't just see what's in it for you. See what's in it for God, for the Christians. So, we must be sure we're waiting on God, on his promises, and not something of the world. And always know that God God will provide. We can pull up Matthew 10:29. All right. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. Right here, it's saying a sparrow is sold for a penny. I mean, that was kind of like, hey, you got a sparrow, I got a penny. I'll give you the penny for a sparrow. But none of them will fall outside of your Father's care. So, I mean, if we're inside of God's care, He's not going to really let us fall to the point that we can't take it. He's going to always provide for us. He's not going to make it to where we can't take it anymore. All right, so Matthew 6:28-30. And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will He not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Yeah, so it's kind of be like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to wear tomorrow. When God's like, hey, I made the grass. He doesn't have to worry. So, I mean, if I love you way more than grass, which is here today, is in the burn pile next, and I'm going to provide for you as well. I provided for the grass, I'm going to provide for you. So, even though God promises to provide for us, it's still not about us. God's promise have to do with the person of Jesus Christ, and not with the person of us. God is always working a bigger plan than just our little vapor of life, our little dash in between the dates of when we were born and when we die. That's our life, that little dash. That's all we've got. So God's going to do whatever He can to work through us in that little dash. And as long as we let Him, just open up all your doors and say, do it, God. All right, so Genesis 18:11-15 says, Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself, and she thought, after I am worn out, and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have sons, or will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did. You laughed. Can't really get anything past God, guys. He sees everything. Which brings me to the point that God sees and knows everything. He is omnipotent, which means all-powerful. He's omnipresent, which means everywhere. Everywhere. He's here, 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 here. He's out there. He's everywhere. And He's omniscient, which means all-knowing. That means He knows what you're thinking, He knows what you're thinking, He knows what you're thinking, He knows what you're thinking. He knows that I'm going to do this. He knew that like billions of years ago. He knows what's going to happen billions of years from now. He knows. Nobody can know that except for God. Okay, so then we go to Genesis 28:1-5, which says, now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as He had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what He had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at that very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. 100 years old, guys. How many people do you know that's 100 years old and their wife's 90 years old? They're both somehow still alive, and they have kids. They just start popping them out. Like, what the heck? You don't see that now. You just don't. I'm pretty sure if you guys were 100 years old, you would be like, I'm ready to die. I don't want to have kids. So that's just kind of crazy how they were that old and still had kids. Then again, people were living to like 500 years old back then. So crazy. So they waited for 25 years for something that they thought could never be done. They were like, everybody else has kids at like, 75. Yeah. People have kids at 75 these days. They waited until Sarah was 90. They're like, can't be done. But they trusted in God, and He came through with His promise. He came through with it. Of course. When does He not? So, one thing you guys should think about is reading the Bible regularly, because it will help you see that God is faithful. Like this. This is just one instance that God's faithful. There's millions of stories in here. This book right here that has God giving a promise, and then later, whether it's a day after, it's right then, or it's 25 years, He still goes through with it. So, wait. And the most reasonable thing possible is to trust a God who has proven Himself trustworthy. He's proved it many times. So, what I want to reiterate here is that worship comes first. Does anybody know what worship comes? I was going to say what comes after worship, but faith that worships will also walk. And faith that walks will also work. Faith that worships, walks, and works is willing. Kind of like what we did with Noah. And my little addition, and faith that is willing will sometimes have to wait. Not always, because there's times where they're like, hey God, I want some food. And if you trust completely that He's going to give you some food, then it's going to be like, boom. Maybe you might have to wait 25 years for that sandwich. Never know. Never know. So, how long did Sarah have to wait? How long? 91 years? Jeez. How long did she have to wait for God to fulfill His promise? 25 years. How old was she? 90. How old was Abraham? 100. How long did he have to wait?
10 years.
10 years. Why would it be different than Sarah? No, yeah, thank you. They're the same. They're 25 years, guys. Come on. So, what in your life do you need to wait patiently for? Is it of God, or is it of the world? That's just something to think about. I know I ran a little bit short today, guys, but we've got small groups today, and hopefully you guys can chat it up in there and get a whole bunch of good discussions, because I'm not very good at giving long presentations, guys. So, go ahead and go to small groups.